How does your media product represent particular social groups? Represents several different social groups, including age, gender and class. So age, it represents age, as we have a young character who's the main girl, who is represented as being very innocent and pure.
She hasn't really experienced a lot of things.
Yeah, she's kind of left unknowing.
Yeah.
And that represents social groups, and it represents young people in that way, and it kind of suggests that they are
they're
very vulnerable.
So the vulnerability of that character reflects off of like the vulnerability of young people in our society.
And we created that representation using mise-en-scene and especially her costume, because we chose to have her wearing quite young-looking clothes.
We did the stereotypical,
baggy jumper, like big hat, leggings.
Yeah, and we put her hair in many different ways, but all of which have like very strong connotations of young people, to really use the stereotypes to help us represent our social groups. We also did age, but when looking at the parents, if someone wants to elaborate.
Innocent, and parents can relate to that sort of thing, because obviously like
it basically uses stereotypes of what
it's
an
very
adult or a
stereotypical
parent would be like. So when you see in the clip where they're all walking together in a flashback, you see both the parents are on the outside, almost being like a
protective barrier to the children on the inside.
Yeah.
And
they're just there to make the happy family kind of feel about the...
Yeah, and we wanted to represent them in this like very positive way to show how tragedies like the one shown in our film can happen to anyone. So it's not to do with them, they're quite normal people, and that's how we wanted to represent them. We really wanted to use the stereotype to represent them as normal, so that a wider range of people can relate to it.
And even though we haven't presented them like, they're not shown as like main characters, they're there, but they're not established characters.
No.
With what you're saying about it can happen to anyone, this type of scenario, they're just normal people. We haven't shown anything special about them. They're not part of like a certain class, established like their regional identity or anything like that. Scenarios like this can still happen to those people, even though they may seem just kind of the normal and nothing's going to happen to them.
And it kind of shows as well that not every bad thing or every occurrence that just is sad or anything like that doesn't just have to happen to adults. It can happen to young people like of any age, even if they don't understand. It doesn't mean that it can't happen to them. It does. So it's kind of showing that, but it's also presenting a sense of normality about people's lives, really.
Yeah, that's also... we also chose to put them as mainly middle-class people, although we didn't really specify that they are middle class. You can kind of interpret it.
Yeah.
But we did that because that's the most relatable, and that is the biggest social class in the country, so more people can relate to them being middle class. Rhys, do you want to talk about gender?
It relates to gender because, like, you have the boy who people would think is quite strong and quite looks after like his younger sister, but in our film it's quite like the boy's quite vulnerable because of obviously he's like dead, but
you don't know that.
Yeah, you don't.
that like having that relationship there and having that relationship be kind of destroyed, that puts the vulnerability over onto the girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, the use of the flashbacks could actually, you could interpret them to be like resembling how something like a tragedy like what we show in our film can separate a family. So we see the girl, and obviously we only see the girl, but we see how affected and hurt she is from what happened because he's not there.
And the fact that we only see the parents in the flashback, you don't see the parents in the like scenes where it's the reality, so you haven't got the parents in that like emotion that she's going through.
She hasn't got like the she hasn't got like the safe stability.
System.
Yeah.
So she's quite
she's very lonely,
Yeah.
and we chose, although again it's very stereotypical, we chose to make her a girl because of that exact reason, because she's like the victim and she's shown as very vulnerable, and by making her a girl, a young girl, it's kind of very stereotypical, but it means that people can relate to that character and they can take their own interpretations about who she is and what she's going through by doing so.
For her, because she's not like, she can probably relate to her older brother better than her parents, but her brother's not there.
Yeah, like you see that through, you see the huge contrast through the flashbacks, because you see her with her stereotypically older protective brother. When she's sad, he's there to look after her, and you see her stereotypically happy family celebrating everything with her that's good, or just having fun with her, and then you go back to reality and you see her sadness and stuff, so it's a big contrast.